We'll call this meeting of the Silver City Town Council to order. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For doing the reading of the mission tonight, there's nobody signed up under public input. Council comments. Councilor Moronis, would you like to start?
No comment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Brick.
No comment.
Thank you, Councilor Cook.
No comment.
Thank you, Councilor Bessie.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, but I have a comment. On the occasion that this is near Veterans Day, I personally want to thank Councilor Ray, town staff members, audience members here in council chambers, and watching at home, and all Grant County veterans for their service to our country. And I want to thank my family members who have done the same. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the town staff who are working on Catches Street sidewalk and crew project. It's looking pretty good, and folks down there are pretty happy. So thank you. Kudos to the Parks Department, who I saw were hard at cleaning up all the leaves in Golf Park this morning. So thanks to them. And as is tradition, on the first meeting in November, especially when we do the election, the election resolution, I'm announcing that I will run for re-election for the position of Councilor District 1. It'll be my third two-year term, and it's been both a pleasure and an honor to serve the residents of District 1 and the town of Silver City residents at large for the past 4 years, and of course to serve with Mayor Marshall and all of the council members as well. I hope to continue doing so, and we do good work together, and so just thought I'd announce that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody need round two? We'll move right along. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the regular meeting of the Town Council from October 23rd, 2012.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting from October 23rd, 2012.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Town Council from October 23rd, 2012. Is there any discussion? There's a motion and a second, no discussion, for approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the Town Council, October 23rd, 2012. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is reports. Mr. Brown. Thank you. Chief Reynolds.
City Council, just want to comment progress on the troops There's two locations that they can be dropped off at, which is Silver City Police Department and also the Church of the Nazarene on Mountain View Road. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything from community development, Mr. Coates?
Mayor, Councilors, I just wanted to update you on the bicycle and pedestrian plan that we've been working on for the last year. Well, did you hear any of what I said?
I can hear it.
Okay. Okay. Working on the bicycle pedestrian plan, we have had one public hearing through the Planning and Zoning Department, or Planning and Zoning Commission, on the pedestrian part of the plan. We were going to do a bicycle public hearing on it at the last P&Z, and that was an election night. No one showed up, so that's been postponed until December, but just wanted to let you know that we're still working on that and hope to bring it to you soon after the first of the year. Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Sorry, I need to go a little bit backwards. Mr. Reynolds, could you tell me, are there any sizes in particular that are needed for the children, for the coats?
We'll take whatever anybody gives. I apologize. We'll take whatever anybody wants to give. Looking for children's coats, one on a, whatever size. We're not too particular.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Sorry.
Where's Mr. Dean?
He had a meeting at 6 o'clock this evening on another project that he's working on.
Is there any objection if we go out of order and leave number 9 till later in the agenda? Hearing no objection, we will skip number 9 to come back later and go to number 10, unfinished business. Approval, disapproval of resolution number 2012-29, a resolution fixing the compensation for the town manager and further authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an employment contract between the town and Alex Brown. And, hold on a second, I'll open that. Mr. Brown has served the town as the town manager for several years now, has proved competency, dedication, and exceptional skill in that job. This resolution would set his salary as well as it discusses some terms for the contract that would be negotiated later. The salary that I'm proposing would be $100,000 per year, and then we would negotiate some other terms within the contract. And in looking around the state, we're still underpaying Mr. Brown, and in comparison to other city managers, as well as he continues to excel at the job as finance director, and it is in the best interest of the town that we retain him in that position as well. And as we could tell, we have at least 8 years, I believe, of audits with no findings, or findings that were later deemed inappropriate. So it's basically 8 years of clean audits. The creativity in doing our finances and working with our staff to get us through the recession years was exceptional, and he's been called on around the state, as well as the positions that he holds on different boards in the community that are very dependent upon his expertise being retained there. And I would happily and excitedly recommend approval of resolution number 2012-29 that will set the stage to retain Mr. Brown as our town manager and finance director. Are there any questions from the audience regarding this resolution? Seeing none, any comments, questions from the council? Councilor Edison.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to wholeheartedly approve resolution number 2012. Move to approve resolution number 2012-29, a resolution fixing the compensation for the town manager and further authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an employment contract between the town and Alex C. Brown.
Councilor Morales. Mr. Mayor, I second that motion. There's a motion and a second to approve resolution 2012-29. Is there any discussion? Councilor Benson.
In the time that I've served on the council, I have to say that the town of Silver City is the envy of municipalities in the state. And Mr. Brown is consistently talked about by other municipalities, their council members, when I go off to different meetings, and as a board member of the New Mexico Municipal League. He has sat on the Municipal League board as a member, and he's been well received. He's been a member of any number of committees off that board as well, and his counsel is always well received by any number of people. And he certainly has his connections in the state and his ability to work with everyone from the different ASME and all the other different groups that we work with has certainly helped the town in many different ways. And during the term that I was on the terms I've been on the council, it's really helped us, his management skills, and as a finance director, we've weathered a lot of ups and downs that many other municipalities were not able to do, especially with the economic times as such as they were. So it's my pleasure to be able to support this. Thank you.
Councilor Morose?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard similar comments and looked across the state, and Alex is excelling compared to his peers, yet still remains one of the staff that's paid less than many of them. I just hope that, like we do with so many other professionals in this town, hope that quality of life is a huge motivator for keeping them here, because I do sometimes fear that we're leaving a lot of room for other towns to try to steal them from us. And hopefully his love for Silver City and our quality of life helps compensate a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Chain him to his desk.
Get out the ball and chain. There's a motion and a second, no further discussion, to approve resolution number 2012-29, a resolution fixing the compensation for the town manager and further authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an employment contract between the town and Alex C. Brown. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you very much for everything. I know he's going to snatch me up because I know this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to approval, disapproval of 2 public celebration permit applications for the Members Regional Arts Council's Black Tie Benefit Ball on December 15, 2012 at the Murray Hotel, 200 West Broadway Avenue, Silver City, New Mexico. Wine grower and small brewer license holder information: Luna Rosa Winery Incorporated, 3710 West Pine, in Deming, New Mexico, 88030, and High Desert Brewing Company of 1201 West Hadley Avenue, Las Cruces, New Mexico, 88005. Ms. McElmont, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. As the director of the Members Region Arts Council, I'm here to seek your approval for these 2 separate celebration permits for the Black Tie Benefit Ball. You have before you a letter detailing the plans that we have for the event. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions? No, sir. Do they have the certificate of occupancy?
Well, there's people staying in the hotel.
Peter Russell was supposed to be here, but he's been ill. And he asked me to pass on that there was a meeting held with the business owner and the building inspector, fire marshal, and code enforcement officer. And the code enforcement officer signed a contingent, approval contingent on some issues being dealt with pertaining to fire issues. And the fire marshal and building inspector both agreed. So they recommended that the application be approved contingent on the issues being corrected.
Regardless, so we can approve the public celebration permit, they just can't hold it in a building without a certificate of occupancy.
Correct. But they just wanted me to explain the reason that there's notations on the request.
I should say that the fire marshal also spoke with the Arts Council about some things he'd like us to do as far as the decorations and things like that, and we're all on the same page. We've agreed to do what he's asked us to do.
Yes, and the fire marshal and building inspector both agreed that they felt that all their requests could be met before the event was held.
Any questions, discussion from the council? Councilor Garcia.
And so I just want to make certain I understand. So we can approve this, but then, because it has on here provisional pending temporary certificate of occupancy to be issued by the building official. So if this is approved, then the council can approve it, but still it'll be dependent on what they're holding it will be dependent on whether or not they have that temporary occupancy.
Yes.
Okay. So that doesn't harm us being able to do this. Okay, I just want to make sure I completely understood that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Entertain a motion. Mr. Mayor. Councilor.
I move to approve two public celebration permit applications for the members Regional Arts Council Black Tie Benefit Ball on December 15th, 2012 at the Murray Hotel, 200 West Broadway Avenue, Silver City, New Mexico. Wine grower and small brewer license holder information: 1 Luna Rosa Winery Incorporated, located at 3710 West Pine, Deming, New Mexico, 88030. And number 2, High Desert Brewing Company, 1201 West Hadley Avenue, Las Cruces, New Mexico, 88005.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion stated.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There's a motion and a second. No further discussion to approve two public celebration permit applications for the Members Regional Arts Council's Black Tie Benefit Ball on December 15, 2012 at the Murray Hotel, 200 West Broadway Avenue, Silver City, New Mexico. Wine grower and small brewer license holder information is Luna Rosa Winery Incorporated at 3710 West Pine, Deming, New Mexico, 88030, and High Desert Brewing Company at 1201 West Hadley Avenue, Las Cruces, New Mexico, 88005. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You ready, Charlie? If it pleases the council, we will go back to number 9, which is public hearing, approval, disapproval of resolution number 2012-27, a metropolitan redevelopment area designation, making certain findings and determinations pursuant to the Metropolitan Redevelopment Code, and designating the Silver City Downtown Metropolitan Redevelopment Area. The town council will serve as the hearing board, and I, as the mayor, will be the presiding officer. Have any members of this hearing board had ex parte discussion with any person regarding the subject matter of this hearing, or had any communication from any party to this case?
No, sir.
No.
No.
I have had discussion with Nick over the years about doing an MRA. Have not had discussion over this particular resolution. I think I will qualify all of us to be on the hearing board. Will all parties and witnesses intending to testify, including those staff members who intend to present testimony or who will be available for questioning, please rise and come to the podium to be sworn in by the town clerk. If you have not been sworn, you will not be permitted to testify or otherwise participate in this hearing. The hearing will be conducted as follows. The town staff shall present a brief synopsis of the application or appeal based on the application or actions taken by the director, by P&Z Commissioner, by town staff. Then the applicant shall present their case. Next will come witnesses in support of, I think we need to change that from application to resolution. Correct, Robert? Next will come witnesses in support of the resolution. The applicant or witnesses may then be questioned by the hearing board. The presiding officer will then ask the applicant if that concludes its case in chief, and states that the proponent and its witnesses will remain available to be further questioned by the hearing board, by staff, or by opponents to the appeal or application. Following the close of the applicant's case, witnesses in opposition to the resolution shall be permitted to testify, during the course of which the witnesses may address questions to any previous witness, but such questions shall be made through the presiding officer. The presiding officer shall have the sole discretion in directing the question for response, considering whether the question is relevant, is cumulative to other testimony, or is otherwise inappropriate. At the close of testimony against the resolution, the presiding officer will ask the applicant, is there anything else you wish to be reflected in the record? It sounds horrible.
Yeah, yours is fuzzy. Over there.
You may.
I, Nicholas Saville,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give
that the testimony I am about to give
in the matter before this council
in the matter before this council
is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth,
is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth,
under penalty of perjury.
under penalty of perjury.
Mr. Deans, you have the floor.
Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Charlie Deans with Community by Design, a consultant. I'm also with the New Mexico Main Street Urban Design Program. And what we're proposing with your blessing is to do sort of just a background about what a metropolitan redevelopment area plan is and how it works, and talk about the designation, which is the resolution before you this evening. This should be sort of a refresher for some of you, because we kind of did this 2 years ago, and for a couple of you, it's going to be new. So I can go through that, and then we can talk specifically about what's on the agenda for this evening in terms of the resolution and the designation piece. So, here we go. The first is just to talk about, in the 1980s, the state of New Mexico approved legislation that is called the New Mexico Metropolitan Redevelopment Code. And basically, that legislation it gave municipalities additional authorities to remove and aid deteriorated or underutilized or blighted portions of a downtown. And so that code, and I'll talk about what some of those additional authorities are under the redevelopment code in the state statute. It begins with establishing a metropolitan redevelopment area. And one of the things that you should also be aware of, this code's been amended a couple of times since the 1980s. Originally, when the legislation was approved, it had a population requirement of 100,000 people or more. And so in the 1980s, we probably all know which city in New Mexico that was written for. About 8 years ago, there was an amendment to the legislation that removed that population requirement, so it made it available to any municipality who wanted to take advantage of these kind of tools. So the code talks about establishing the area, and that's kind of the first step, and that's really what we're doing this evening. So the first step is just to look at defining this area, and there's a criteria in the statute that talks about designating the area that meets the criteria as a metropolitan redevelopment area. And these are just some of the criteria. You don't have to meet all of these. You just have to meet any one of these, but it's an area that has high unemployment, low business activity, vacant, underutilized parcels, and deteriorating buildings, or maybe zoning conformance issues. And so once one makes an assessment of the area that meets this criteria, we draw a line on the map, we write a designation report that documents this area meeting this particular criteria, and that's the report that you have this evening. It was in your packet, and there's a map that's defining the metropolitan redevelopment area. So we're really at this first step this evening of looking at a resolution to approve that, and I'll talk more about the report and the area in a moment. But after that area is designated, after the designation report is approved by the local jurisdiction, then it moves into developing the plan. And so the plan for that area starts to look at, the key word here is that it looks at projects within the plan that, when implemented, will help to eliminate the blighted and simulate the economic activity. And this just lists sort of what some of those projects can occur. It's pretty broad under the statute in terms of what those projects can be, and we indeed have some idea of what those are going to be within the downtown Silver City area. So once the plan has been developed and created, and these are just a couple of examples of projects that are potential projects within Silver City. Just to give you an example, once the plan has been approved, and that plan is going to come back to you at a future date, it's a public hearing, and you will be adopting an ordinance approving the plan. The plan, these are some of the tools that enables the plan to be implemented. The legislation, the statute, is really geared towards creating public-private partnerships and getting these projects done. It does relax the anti-donation clause in the state constitution so that the city is able to do public-private partnerships with private property owners or developers in the downtown in implementing some of these projects. This is just a brief outline of what those particular roles in different communities have been through those private partnerships. I have one example. This is sort of the classic example in the city of Albuquerque, the old Albuquerque High School. It was a high school for a while. The school district closed it. It sat vacant for 20 years, demolition by neglect. It was vandalized. It was a real problem. It was causing issues with the neighborhood. And then the city of Albuquerque created an MRA area, Metropolitan Redevelopment Area, in that neighborhood around the high school. They purchased it from the public school district, got funding, because once it was determined to be a metropolitan redevelopment area, it made it eligible for some EPA money. So they got EPA funding for that. Then in 2008 entered into a development agreement with a private developer who did an adaptive reuse, and it is now being used for apartments and condominiums and some retail space on the first floor. So that's what the high school looks like today on Central Avenue. Just to talk about some more of the toolbox and what the statute is allowing to occur, we talked a little bit about the public-private partnerships and these development agreements. If there's zoning regulations or incentives, you have the authority to change it to the zoning or these incentives within the district itself. Land assembly, I should mention, this comes up occasionally, not too much anymore, but about 6 years ago, just to make sure the governor at the time, Governor Richardson at the time, there was a provision in the statute of allowing condemnation for economic development purposes. And then you may remember 4 or 5 years ago, there was a Supreme Court case which actually ratified and said it was okay, but it made most states and governors so nervous about some of the issues with that it has been removed. So that authority is not, in terms of condemnation for economic development purposes, that was removed out of the statute. So most people still think that the city's going to come and condemn my property as a result of this MRA plan, and it's not the case, and it really has never been the case in the state of New Mexico. But it also offers some funding and financial tools and incentives that the city typically wouldn't have. A tax increment financing district, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and that is potentially being proposed within this MRA area. You can do revenue bond financing. I'm not an expert on that, but the statute does allow you to use, if you create the TIF district, that you can go get revenue bonds and repay that debt with the TIF district increments. Tax deferrals or credits are also possible under this, which I rarely have seen used in the state of New Mexico. But the one tool that we have been promoting within this is CDBG monies, CDBG funds. When you're filling out that application, there's 3 different ways you can be eligible for CDBG funds within your municipality. The one that's most often used is the mod load income level. I think it's 71%, 72%, but it's is how most municipalities are using that. There's also, on the application, you're eligible if you've done a metropolitan redevelopment area and you have an area that has been designated as an MRA, that area is also eligible. So we've been using that to promote areas that normally wouldn't be eligible for CDBG funding, but as a result of this, your downtown now could be eligible for some of that funding, because right now I think you've got 2 neighborhoods, Chihuahuita, and I forget the second one, that meets the income eligibility level, but with this designation report, the downtown area will also be eligible for these funds in the future. And as I mentioned, it also opens up opportunities with EPA and other federal funding sources. That basically is kind of the quick summary of what the Metropolitan Redevelopment Area Code is about, and some of the tools and how it works, and we're really just focusing on the designation report this evening. I'll talk a little bit about tax increment financing districts tonight. We can talk about it again in the future. You're not doing anything tonight that's about TIF districts, but we'll come back at a future meeting and I can talk a little bit more about this. But I just want you to understand this tool, and it's an option for the council. It does require that the plan be adopted. And basically the increment is really about just, there's no new taxes. This one actually gets a little more, explains a little more about the TIF district. It is creating a geographical district. This increment that is generated starts a small little savings fund that means that the funds that get raised within the district are spent within the district. You will have an opportunity to create a management board, but the state statute right now, you will be serving as the redevelopment board in approving the projects and how that money gets established. And as the last one says, it's often confused about this tax increment. It is not raising taxes, it is not a new tax, it's using the existing property tax base. And this is a very simple diagram of what that looks like, but the year that the TIF district gets approved, that district gets established, creates what we call the baseline year, or year 0. And then as property values increase over time, and this TIF district has a life of 20 years, it goes away after 20 years, it's just sort of a little catalytic fund. But over that 20-year time, this increment, which is any property values, any property taxes that result above the baseline from that first year, go into this special fund. And as I said, we can talk some more about this in a future meeting. It's really not what's being proposed tonight. Just to give you an overview, as I mentioned about Albuquerque, because they've had the benefit of this redevelopment code for the last 20, 25 years, they've done 23 MRAs around the city of Albuquerque that are all shown on this map. Since 6 years ago, since the redevelopment code, the statute was amended, which removed the population requirement, particularly New Mexico Main Streets, we started to use this tool in some of the smaller communities. And this is just a list of Main Street communities that have been utilizing this tool. We've adopted it in several other small communities. Other communities are in the process. I'm working with all of them in terms of their MRA plan and whether or not they want to set up a TIF district. The bottom one there is the only other community in New Mexico that is, I'm working with the Village of Santa Clara to help them on redeveloping their village center with an MRA plan and give them some of these tools so that they can also take advantage of it. There's really no downside to this in terms of the plan itself and the tools that it provides. And so we've been promoting all of our communities who we feel have the capacity to be able to manage it and understand it well enough that we've been helping them in this process. So you won't be alone in terms of adopting the MRA plan, and I think that's in January, scheduled right now. So that's just pretty quick overview about what MRA plans are, what they do, and how they work, and what some of those tools are. We can talk, I think, that is the last slide. We can talk specifics tonight in terms of the designation report that has been written and the boundary that has been identified in your handout in the materials that you have. And you should have received, we did receive one letter, and I should add, we've had one community workshop with this identical presentation that I conducted on September 4th. We had a display ad in the paper, and on September 4th we had a community information workshop, and I believe we sent out a mailing to the property owners for that workshop, Ken? Yeah, you did a mailing. The planning department did a mailing to all the property owners within that boundary, so they were notified of. We had a turnout of about 50 residents. They had a lot of questions. I didn't hear anybody with any real concerns, but since that workshop on September 4th, we did have a request from one property owner who asked to be excluded, and I believe you have that letter. I spoke with that property owner, and I have it gets a little fuzzy on the edges there sometimes, and when we're drawing lines on aerial photographs, I mean, actually the line sort of went right through the middle of their property, but there was a request to exclude that property from the boundary, and let me just make sure, just for the record, from Marcia Stout and Dale Housley is to exclude their property on 904 Santa Rita Street. I've looked at that property, I would recommend that we can exclude it. I talked with Mrs. Stout, explained to her the difference, and there really wasn't a downside, but she still felt that they didn't want to be included. So they have sidewalks. Their house looks very nice. And, when we do that inventory, when we look at the criteria and we start defining this area, we don't get to a parcel by parcel looking at every building and looking at every lot in terms of, we consider a few things, not just the visual, but also the census tract and the census information in terms of income levels and those kinds of things. So it is a fairly broad brush, but since we had this request, I didn't see any reason. There wasn't there wasn't anything necessary to keep that property within the boundary. So if you do take action on this evening, we would request that you approve the amended map that's in your packet. That concludes my presentation. If you have questions either about the whole MRA plan process or specifically about tonight, the designation report and the boundary, we can address those.
Any questions?
About the report?
Councilor Cook.
I believe when we were, a few meetings ago, we were designating the business district, and people wanted out of it because it affected when they sold their homes and loans. Does this affect like loans? Like, do you move into another bracket, or if people do have homes in that area? No? Okay. All right.
Councilor Madison.
We're going to the report itself.
Sure.
Mr. Deans, just a few notes. You might want to change the map so that it says West Street rather than Western Street near the college, because it is West Street, as far as I know.
Yes.
Just a few typos, yeah, if we're going to, make this a permanent record, since it's part of the resolution. And I do have a question on a couple things in the report. I think it's just maybe the way I read it. In particular on page 4, I think it was the second paragraph at the top. I didn't really quite understand that second paragraph on the page, because when I first read it, it almost sounded as if it's the first sentence somehow was part of the issue. Whereas I really think it's the rest of the paragraph that's the issue. Am I not correct? That the fact that the number of buildings within the downtown area are vacant and underutilized, or is it because combined with the fact that several major streets through downtown are predominantly occupied by offices, retail businesses, and hospitality services, although hospitality services, retail isn't really supposedly prominent in our area, according to the economic report that's later on in the... Yeah, those are little things that I catch, because it said that that's really actually not very prominent. So when I looked at it, I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, what's truly impairing the conditions based on what the MRA designation is the deterioration of the buildings, the vacancy, the underutilization.
Yes, beginning of the second.
Yeah, so it's really the second sentence. So perhaps, when I look at things like that, I don't want our business owners to think that somehow the fact that they have businesses downtown are part of the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just little, I don't know how we can, if we pass the resolution, if we're able to kind of just correct the plans a little bit in a few places so that it doesn't look, it looks a little bit less damaging in some areas. That's just, yeah. And then there was one more question I had real quickly. So, under the economic conditions, under the plan, on page 10, it lists the reason for, the first sentence says, as indicated by the number of vacant buildings in the downtown neighborhoods of Silver City, businesses have closed or moved out of downtown because of its physical condition. Is that the primary reason why businesses have moved out of downtown area?
It's one of the contributing reasons.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily the primary one.
I know that this is to support the MRA designation, but I also know that the economy has something to do with it as well.
Yes.
Just want to tie it back into the whole reporting structure on the economic that follows through with the rest of it. And the demographics, which I think are really pertinent, because it does substantiate further on the demographics with, and the comparison across the rest of Silver City, and I think that we want to make sure that we enhance that, the fact that, I think that comparison is really key, and the fact that we don't have as many retail businesses as we thought we did downtown. So I think that, too, is critical to the report. So it's, I thought it was a very good report. It really did, to me, explain why having this designation would really benefit the town and benefit us in attracting, redevelopment in this area. So I really appreciated the information that was provided.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Councilor Cook?
I'm looking at some of these. I'm looking at some of these pictures that were taken. I look at some of these pictures, I'm like, but then there's like a picture here. What's wrong with this picture? Is it the curb or the building? And help to eliminate the blighted, to me, it's a very, I don't know, I don't like that phrase. And then, where was it? I think slum was mentioned somewhere too. I know we have rundown buildings on Bullard Street and Texas and side streets, but does this mean like they're going to get bulldozed down? And is this like funding for these buildings, like these people, these business owners can like go, hey man, I want to borrow some money and fix it? Is that what we're here? I mean, is this what this is about? That they can take low income or low interest loans and fix their buildings and then try to rent them?
It gives them the ability, is this working?
I think mine is.
Okay. As long as you can hear me, or as long as it's getting recorded. It gives them what it sets up is that it gives the town the ability to set up low interest loans, if that's one of the projects or tools you want to take advantage of. I'm not aware of, as a building owner, that they can go to a bank and say, we're eligible for these federal loans for these areas that have met this designation under the state statute. So it gives the town the tool to create that, if that's a program you would like to see come out of this. That's all part of that public-private partnership where you can create that to help those building owners. That is an option in this. Now I'm not aware of other programs that, other than because they're in a Main Street district, but that's not part of being in the MRA. They have the ability to go, there's a revolving loan fund because they're in the Main Street district that they can take advantage of, but that's not part of what the MRA is setting up for them. It's going to provide other opportunities for the town to work with those private property owners on doing improvements to their property, whether they're facades, whether they're sidewalks, infrastructure. That's the tool that the town has available if they want to provide some assistance. Yeah, I'm sorry about the word blighted. It's in the statute. I try to dance around underutilized, deteriorated, but, I can't. And in fact, it's not, in Silver City's history, it's not the first time it's been designated, so.
Counselor Benson.
Just a quick question for Alex. I noticed that in the... Can you hear me? Kinda? Oh, he wasn't, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my apologies. I'll ask you, in the presentation that you provided, it did say that it would avail the city or the town of monies such as the CDBG and brownfields and potentially other options that we may not have had before.
Yes.
For certain areas that we had not applied in the same way. And because it opens these options under the MRA designation.
Yes.
It also provides us with the capability it provides the ability to relax the anti-donation
That's correct.
laws a little bit so that we can work with public-private partnerships,
That's
correct?
correct. Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure I got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Charlie? Charlie, I got a whole slew of problems with the plan. I think the plan itself is evidence that we make ourselves what we need to make ourselves to get funding, because I can find probably a half a dozen other plans sitting on the shelf in the city that contradict this and say how great we are, come do business here. You know, and that really, really bothers me. I understand the language, the criteria you have to meet, we have to meet to get this designation. I also understand very well that we have significant problems downtown in that area. I also know that there's many areas down there that have had a lot of rehab work and are excelling in the community. There's a building on Bullard that was built, I think, in the 90s that is not in that bad a shape. But according to our resolution, we're going to declare that it is in a slum and blighted area. I asked a property owner down there, how would you feel if your building was all of a sudden, as of tonight, plopped down in the middle of a slum, an area that is designated slum and blighted? And if he would have been here tonight, he would have been. Whether the intent is to qualify for a specific funding purpose, or a bad choice of words. It is a horrible set of words. I don't think we're doing our town. I don't think we're doing people that we want to attract to do business and occupy and develop these buildings and create them into economic generators any favors by designating them slum and blighted. I think we have taken, in looking at this district and looking at the 23 MRAs that were done in Albuquerque, I think we're taking one broad stroke and taking out the whole downtown area, when Albuquerque didn't do that. Albuquerque took pieces and they attacked the slum and blighted areas and made that an MRA and addressed it, and then moved on to another area that was slum and blighted. If you go to page 9, if I can go to page 9, there's a picture behind the fire department. It says, poor parking and pedestrian facilities at town-owned facilities on North Main Street contribute to the area's deteriorating conditions. That's a dead-end street that has been the fire department and police department parking lot for years. And it is basically a platted street. It doesn't go anywhere and doesn't come from anywhere. And to put in here that that's creating or contributing to the deteriorating conditions, I don't think is accurate. So I may be able to support this at some point when the plan gets refined, edited. I also think we should really look at whether we want to designate some of the residential areas that are in this area that is on the map currently. You know, I don't think one mailing and some public notices that go out in the paper are a true indication of people's concern. I think there is great concern that we continue to support Main Street, the Main Street District, the businesses downtown. But I think if people really looked at what this was saying and doing and portraying our town, I think there'd be a lot more people here that would be concerned over their investments that they've made in this town and what we're doing to that investment, with a promise of opportunity. So you can respond, but as I stand right now, I truly hope that this fails tonight. Do you want to respond?
We don't do a parcel-by-parcel inventory. And as I mentioned, blighted is in the statute, but the criteria isn't only blighted. As I said on that list, it can be any one of those. It certainly isn't a slum. By me, a slum is an entirely different definition. But I know it's in the statute, and so it's in, you know, we've got to use that language. But the criteria is around economic activity, vacancies, broken sidewalks. Those are also the kinds of things that can be used to, qualify the area for this designation. So that's the best response I have. I understand what you're saying, and you may or may not agree with we tried to document the economic condition and the activity and how low it is in this particular area, but it's pretty broad brushed.
Mr. Seibel was jumping out of his chair when I got done talking. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, we're in a public hearing, so I should finish up here for a moment in case there's others who want to speak. I can talk more about the city of Albuquerque and how they approach this. Those 23 areas, I mean, they were not all that. I can go back to that map. Some of them are pretty large, much larger than downtown Silver City, in terms of how they define some of those areas. So it's not that there is one just for the entire downtown. That was one of the first ones that they created in downtown Albuquerque. And of course, it worked the way it's supposed to work. Downtown Albuquerque would not meet the criteria now. It's 20 years later. I mean, they are out of that. The area is redeveloped enough that it wouldn't meet the criteria as it did 20 years ago. So it has been shown to be effective, and it has been. And Albuquerque's accepted the fact that a lot of their areas are in a deteriorating condition, and some of them are much larger than the area we're talking in downtown Silver City. But I don't want to. I understand, the use of the term, and there may be property owners who have a concern. They haven't expressed that to me. So we went way beyond the statutory requirements in terms of notification with that mailing and doing that workshop with folks. Most people had concerns coming into that meeting, but after they understood it and what it was about, most of them thought, there were the benefits outweighed what some of this initial issue is in terms of the designation.
So if we did the designation, we did this, and then we follow step by step the plan that you would dream that we would follow, how long would it take for us to see a difference in our downtown physically and economically?
Well, I'm an optimist. I mean, I think there's already some improvements that have occurred just as a result of even approving the downtown action plan. 2010. I mean, this plan that we did 2 years ago and was approved, the projects, and this is going to be eventually what is going to be called your MRA plan. We're going to re-adopt this only as an MRA plan, have already begun. So I'm pretty optimistic that with some of these tools, and depending on which ones you take advantage of, I think you're going to see a difference within 5 years that is really going to be pretty noticeable in terms of the downtown area. But it does take time. It's not going to happen overnight. This is not a silver bullet. It's still going to be incremental, but it's going to give some tools there that you don't have right now.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Bedison?
I did say that I thought the report did demonstrate certain things, and I believe that the mayor brought up some things that I had failed to mention, and I'm glad he did. Because one of the things that I question is, we have the way it's beyond the downtown area. I mean, it goes, beyond College up to portions of near the intersection of Highway 90 and 180, but not really. It's an interesting way it's been drawn because, I'm not sure why certain properties have been left out and other properties have been included. I know you say you don't do a parcel by parcel, but, I'm just uncertain why certain areas have been included and other areas have been excluded, especially when, we have a beautiful new structure being put up by, HMS, just on the corner of 12th and Pope, and that area has been included as a blighted area, and it's not going to be anymore. I agree with the mayor. I guess in some respects, when I looked at this first of all, and I failed to mention it earlier, I thought it was a little bit broad because it did go so far into residential areas, and I know that most of the plans center on the Main Street area, and I think there needs to be some revision to the report, as I mentioned, in some areas, because I am concerned that it's the way it's worded, and the way some of the paragraphs are organized may have our business folks kind of feel pretty bad that they're down there just because of the way it's done. But focusing on the downtown corridor, or at least the Main Street corridor, might be the best way to begin, rather than doing such a broad stroke. I think comparison between Silver City and Albuquerque might be a bit inappropriate because while some of the areas that they did in Albuquerque might be larger than this size, or that's not relevant. Silver City is much smaller, and maybe this is too broad a stroke for us in some respects. Maybe we should bite off a smaller part where the main focus has been on the downtown action plan, and maybe that's what we should focus on, is that Main Street corridor and that Main Street area. I'm not sure that it's necessary to move so rapidly that we lose sight of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's my, I'm thankful that the mayor brought up what he did. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Morones?
Just a couple very quick questions. And I'll start off with a comment. I know blight has a very negative connotation, but I notice you put the definition of blighted area as defined by the state statute. Is that what this comes from? And I know it's like a paragraph long, and many elements of it seem very benign and very simple, very easy for you to get any property almost to be called blighted, as long as you can get over that negative connotation that we so oftentimes add to it. I would hate for something to be basically, talk about a broad brush stroke. I'd hate for something to just be lost based on the semantics or the connotation of a single word. That it seems like we do meet a lot of this definition, even though oftentimes we stick to the first couple comments that the statute puts in here. So I just want to make sure that this is from the state statute, and in many cases, other people, Albuquerque included, have used the word blight with some of these more benign reasons. Is that?
Yes.
Now, also, even though we can't, I agree that we should not be compared to Albuquerque per se. But in some of those bigger MRAs, those areas that are bigger than the one that we're proposing, were there nice buildings in those areas?
Yes.
So it wasn't that every single building was a disaster or deteriorating or falling apart. There was very nice properties mixed in with these areas that it's very difficult. Would it be more difficult to actually spot designate just poorly, just the buildings that are falling down and such?
Yes. It's difficult to do that.
So it is much more practical to bring a slightly larger area, even though they have very nice, well-designed buildings that are up to code and brand new?
Yeah, and the criteria is not just about visual appearance. I mean, that's the simplest thing for people to say. Blighted means visually, when we get into the economic activity, income levels, employment, and those things, we've got to go to the census information and census tracts and blocks when we can get that level of information. And actually, the Beaver at UNM did this analysis for us. So they had, but that's what often creates this geographical boundary, is the data is coming from census tracts or census blocks to justify, because we don't use just the visual, whether a building is deteriorating or not. There's these other metrics, these other measures that go into it, which are much more benign and fall within this definition. And we also typically, I try to stay away from residential areas personally. Those Albuquerque, I've only done 4 or 5 of those MRA plans in the city of Albuquerque. Albuquerque has used this a lot in residential areas. A lot of those areas are neighborhoods and residential areas. I typically don't try to include them because it gets difficult. And with this one homeowner who said, well, I don't consider, because they're using this blight as a visual thing. Our house, it's a really nice house and it's historic, and and it is a beautiful house. So I try to stay away from calling a homeowner's home blighted, because it's not, it just isn't that correct. But we do try to use other economic indicators to draw this line, and often we're dealing with census blocks and census tracts, and so that's why it tends to get a little bit of this broader brush. And I should mention, since you brought up the boundary, what you don't have is the zoning map, and all of the properties within this boundary before you are following the commercial zoning district in the town, and so that is another influence in terms of, although I know that there is some residential uses within there. But you're correct, Counselor, about the broadness of this definition and what the code says.
There are a number of other plans that indicate that they were doing things well, that we're on the right track, and might seem to contradict this document. But did any of those say that we're not blighted, like we are absent of blight, or this area is not a blighted area?
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't know if you had researched any of that background or used that as part of your research.
I did not.
Then it's, thank you.
You made his point. Counselor Cook.
Okay, Charlie, it doesn't work. Is it working now? No.
No, just be quiet.
I can yell. So Charlie, like, who made this map? I keep looking at it, it's like, what's this little zigzag here and zigzag over there? Like, maybe it's following the sidewalk to Hudson. I just don't get it. And then why it goes way up College. And I know that area pretty well. I drive it several times a day, 7 days a week. And it's not blighted or slum.
But there's low economic activity, I mean, it's meeting the other criteria from census data. And you're correct. Some of this is not going to be the visually characteristic of what we might consider blight, but because that blight definition is so broad, it's meeting the definition under other criteria of economic activity or low income or unemployment and that kind of data, which is going into that broad definition. Now, I can answer your first question, Counselor, about how the line was created, and it was both the criteria as well as the committee who was working on the downtown action plan at the time, and that little jagged portion along the east boundary, there's probably parts of Hudson Street that would meet this criteria, but it was really thought that we should keep this to sort of the downtown area. Hudson, if there's a future MRA area, should almost be its own corridor, just like we're using downtown as the area that Hudson could fall under a whole nother MRA plan with a whole nother set of issues and do both sides of Hudson in a planning process. And so that's why you just get these sort of little pieces of, they're really right-of-way is what's causing those little pieces that extend out to Hudson. They are not private property. So the private property along Hudson was sort of intentionally said, that's a future one, let's just, if there's a future plan, let's do both sides of Hudson as its own plan and solving its own issues. So that's why it does look a little funny until you get the story.
Any other discussion? Councilor Bredesen.
Okay. I'm gonna ask some questions based on Councilor Cook. So that little area in College, low economic activity, you've got the library, you have it's a veterans, or what is it,
VFW Hall.
VFW Hall. There's, what is it? I'm sorry, what? American Legion. Okay, there's a church and a funeral home. And then there's the College Plaza. And I think there's some residences. There's not a whole lot of economic activity per se because of, you've got the town library there, that takes up a whole block. Oh, and there's Smith Realty. It's not, and then realtors, of course, usually work independently. They don't necessarily get, they get paid commission type. It's a different type of deal. So, when I look at that, I kind of go, well, does it really fit into my thing? And then the little jaggedness, there's some private properties that are included in the jaggedness, it looks like. It's not all right of way. No? Even when some of those buildings are...
They're town properties.
They're town properties?
Yes.
So they're blighted.
So they're blighted. Okay, the one, yeah, I can... Okay. Huh. Okay, I can see what you're talking about now. Those are town properties. Okay. I don't know, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Downtown Action Plan focuses on Main Street, correct?
Not necessarily.
But currently focuses primarily on Main Street and doesn't extend into these other areas that are on this map.
Well, that's the plan boundary. The MRA boundary and the Downtown Action Plan boundary are one and the same at this point. Now, that's not a requirement, and we can adjust this MRA designation area and still leave the downtown action plan just the way it is. And so that's certainly one of the possibilities this evening. And if we want to start changing the line, we can get it up on the wall, and I can do some editing to that map. If college, in your opinion, shouldn't be included, we can exclude that portion. We could focus it on Bullard and the downtown area.
And at the present time, just to be honest with you, I just think that the plan needs to be revisited a little bit more. The plan and the boundary needs to be revisited. I think the plan needs to be reworked a little bit. It needs some editing. It needs to be a little bit, there's just some gaps. I pointed out some of the issues I have. And I think that there's a way to make it tighter.
Yes.
And there's some other editing issues I didn't bring up because they're not immaterial, but there are issues I have with it. But
Mr. Skevrin?
This resolution does not adopt or incorporate this plan. This resolution makes findings and outlines a map. The plan itself is what I believe that you're going to propose be the plan, but not for this resolution, but it is not being adopted tonight.
And I think it's just the semantics. What the council is referencing as the plan is, what they're meaning is the designation report. Am I correct? You're not talking about the plan. Yeah, what you're calling the plan is actually this designation report.
Yes, the designation report is providing substantial evidence to back up the findings that you're making. It doesn't need to be exact. It just needs to have some reasonable relationship to support the findings. The actual plan, I assume, will be a different document.
Yes.
And that it's not being submitted. And I understand the concern, and I brought this up when I first met, is you're calling yourself something to get funding. That's the bottom line. And blight, according to our dictionary here, is an ugly urban environment. That's the definition that we get up from here. So do you want to call yourself ugly to get money? That's pretty much what you just said, and you got problems with that.
I absolutely have problems with that. Not personally. There's plenty that would help me with that. I don't want to kill this as far as going forward. I just don't like how it's presented. Even considering what our attorney just says, giving us substantial evidence to support our findings, I don't think this designation report does that. I think it's got some problems. And I think if we would narrow the map down, I had issues with when they developed that for the planning and the zoning. I had issues with how they did that. I have issues with it on this as well. We're taking what has been historically on paper and replicating it when it didn't work for us before. That's why we're talking about it again. And when you look at some of these areas, we're saying that these are areas that are creating our blight. And I'm not going to argue with Beaver. I'm arguing the structural issues with downtown. We're stating that the Yankee Street, for example, has got 2.5-foot tall sidewalks and has been eroded down And that is an issue that's described in here as creating blight. One, I don't think it creates blight. I think it creates a character in Silver City that our town was formed by floods. That shaped our town. That is something that we could be using as part of a walking tour in downtown Silver City. However, in this case, it creates a pedestrian hazard and ADA access issues. So let's use it on that for this case, but everywhere else, let's use it as that's what makes Silver City unique. The other issue is if we're moving forward with a plan and we use an issue such as that as one of the things that put us in this position, then I would expect our plan going forward would be to resolve the problem. I don't think we're going to resolve that because the buildings are 2.5 feet above the street now. And if we were to bring the street up, we would be flooding the buildings or creating lengthy tunnels that have a whole another issue. So using evidence that supports our findings that we have no intention of fixing, I don't think that is good business and a good argument to have when you say, you know, I supported my findings with A, and yeah, I don't care about A.
It's fine taking those references out. You're absolutely correct. You've got beautiful sidewalks. I mean, those are character-defining elements to your downtown. I mean, they don't meet the standards, and so I can document this designation area a lot of different ways, and it doesn't have to be by those high WPA sidewalks. If you're suggesting we revisit this and we take some of these pieces out that we're not going to correct, right, I'm totally fine with that. If that's what I'm understanding, hearing you say, Mr. Mayor, and come back with a revised report, and I'm hearing a revised boundary line, if that's your wish, then, you know, we can certainly relook at that area.
That would be my wish. You know, I think if we're in an interesting situation that we have to have a hearing for this topic. So I don't suppose we could have a work session and just go through the next draft line by line and work it out, because then we'd all have ex parte. Am I correct, Robert?
You could continue the public hearing and have Mr. Deans return with a different set of justifications for the findings. The resolution itself would be unchanged. It would be the underlying evidence that you would have as amended. And with that new evidence, it may be that you say there's not enough to support the findings, or if there is enough, at least you might be more comfortable with them.
So what you're saying is we would just postpone this hearing or postpone action on this resolution?
Yes, and the designation report that's appended would be replaced with something else. The best effort of Mr. Deans to justify, to give you grounds to make the findings that he's asking you to make. Now, whether that's possible in the contract that they have with Main Street, I don't know that.
Come on up, Dave.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm Nick Seibel, and I'm the Main Street Project Manager for Silver City. and thank you for the opportunity to speak at the hearing this evening. In listening to Mr. Dean's testimony this evening, we've kind of taken a negative turn, I think, in terms of the questioning from the way that I have looked at what's before you tonight, and in the way that certainly the Main Street organization has looked at it in promoting this and bringing it forth to you. You know, in my capacity as Main Street manager, it is not my job to go around and talk about how bad Silver City is. In fact, we spend an awful lot of time highlighting all the unique characteristics of Silver City in marketing and advertising on our website. We don't tend to talk about the problems that we have when we're talking about the good things about Silver City. Conversely, when you're talking about the problems and the things you address, you are not often in the habit of tempering that by saying, oh, but there's lots of good things too. This is a plan that looks at problems that we need to address. This is not a document that looks at marketing for Silver City or the good things we have going for us, because I hope that we all agree that we do have lots of good things going for us, both as a community and in our downtown. Now, just for points of illustration, I mean, you can look at the Big Ditch, for instance, in a lot of different ways. That was Main Street. And so if you want to look at what it was historically intended to be, the Big Ditch is a disaster. It represents a loss of, well, what in today's dollars would be billions of dollars worth of public infrastructure and private investment that's gone. You could look at it as an erosion control problem, because even today we have buildings that are built along the Big Ditch that are threatened by erosion in that ditch. That's a problem. Or you can look at it and say it's a beautiful public park. You can say it's one of the things that makes Silver City what it is. There's lots of different ways to look at any element of our community, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. When I look at this designation report that I'm hoping that you will adopt this evening, what I see is a toolbox. We have been at downtown redevelopment as a Main Street community for 27 years as of right now. And there have been folks that were working at making downtown a better place for long before that. 27 years ago, the tools of the Metropolitan Redevelopment Code were not available to Silver City. They are today. We accomplished an awful lot without those tools, but there's a lot more that it remains to be done. There's a lot more that we can do if you just make those tools available. There's been a lot of focus on why certain areas are included. And there's certainly good reasons from the official designation in the statute why they can be included. Well, why should they be included? Why do we want our public library? Why do we want that piece of College Avenue included? Why do we want Pope Street included? Well, when we make these things eligible for community development block grant money, for instance. Let's say we decide we would like to extend the pedestrian scaled street lighting that we have downtown up towards the university along College Avenue. It's a plan a lot of folks have talked about for a lot of years. If we have that area included in this plan, it will make that area eligible for those sorts of expenditures with those monies. They won't be otherwise. It's not just bad, and in fact, from my perspective, it's hardly bad at all. It's really a set of opportunities. It's identifying our downtown, saying we have done a lot of great things down here. There are things that remain to be done, and these tools will allow us to do them. We've talked about the boundary a lot, and just looking at that, I'll say that historically, if you looked at what we considered to be downtown Silver City 25 years ago, on the south side and the west side of the map that you see here, that's exactly what you would have seen had you looked at the original Main Street area. So that section of College Avenue, that's always been considered to be downtown. That spit that goes up Yankee Street and Broadway and Spring Street, that's always been considered to be our downtown district. Where this map varies from our historical definition of downtown is on the north side and the east side. And Mr. Dean's talked a little bit about the rationale behind the extensions along Hudson Street. Well, the reason for including Pope Street, the new HMS building, Golf Park, in our definition of downtown is that we see in that HMS building that that part of downtown is already beginning to redevelop. And in that HMS building, you see the potential for what some of that redevelopment could look like. If we were to build buildings up to the lot line, like that new HMS building is done, if we were to include elements that relate to the street, as that HMS building has done, and you can compare that then to buildings next door, which are buildings that, have big parking lots in front of them instead of having the parking behind, as HMS does, there are opportunities for that area to develop as almost an extension of downtown, where we can extend the sort of pedestrian environment, the sort of attractive character that we have downtown into this new area. This, as Mr. Deans mentioned, is based on our Downtown Action Plan, which was adopted by the council a couple of years ago now. And the basis, or the conclusion of that Downtown Action Plan is a number of key ideas. Those are the projects that we hope to accomplish. If we move forward with this MRA designation, what we'll more than likely ask is for this council to consider those key ideas as the primary things that we would like to work on with the metropolitan redevelopment area. If that were to happen, our current Downtown Action Plan includes all sorts of things downtown, but it also includes, for instance, the new civic campus that Mr. Brown, the leadership of this community, has proposed around Goff Park. Recently, the town's consolidated its holdings there in the block just south of Goff Park by acquiring the old Silver Shamrock building. And I know that this council, that the city administration, has plans for that property. This will allow that to be considered part of downtown. This will direct that development and look at it in a comprehensive way so that we continue to maintain our public offices downtown. And so as that design process moves forward, we'll consider how that integrates with the potential for development of new buildings, businesses, restaurants that will serve the people that will work in those buildings. This is a set of opportunities for our community. This is not a negative. Which brings me to the quote that I hope that the newspapers do not take out of context. That quote is, "Silver City is a slum. Silver City is blighted." These are established facts that have been repeatedly affirmed by the council of the town of Silver City. And I'm not just talking about downtown. I'm not just talking about the areas in this boundary, in this plan before you. Silver City is a colonia. And one of the criteria for declaring yourself a colonia is you have to say, we are blighted, we are a slum. That ship has sailed, Silver City has made that determination, and they have reaffirmed it. And what have we gotten in exchange? We have gotten, every other year, monies coming into this community to improve the community, to pave streets, to improve infrastructure. It has been a total win for our community. And if you go ask the man on the street, Mr. Mayor, if you were to go talk to the merchant that you talked to or the property owner about the impact of having your building designated as blighted or slum, I would be willing to bet that that person had no idea that, in fact, their property had been so declared more than 2 decades ago. So the important thing here is what this will allow us to do. Main Street, and in fact this community, has an amazing track record of going out, going to the legislature, going to the federal government, taking advantage of all the grant programs, the funding opportunities that are out there, and making great things happen downtown. From the new visitor center, to the Big Ditch Park, to new sidewalks, street lights, the list goes on and on. This offers tools that we can use to help ourselves, and then when we go forward for that external funding, we can say, we have taken advantage of every tool that's available to us. We have helped ourselves to the maximum extent that we possibly can, and we still need your help, because we still have work to be done. But none of that is possible without moving forward and adopting this determination report tonight and designating this boundary. And I sincerely hope that you will see fit to move forward. We can certainly go back and look at adjusting boundaries, but there is a certain logic to this boundary, and again, it is echoed in several other plans and in lots of things that we'd like to use these tools for going forward. So I would ask you, please don't look at this as a negative for our community, because it is not. This is an opportunity to do great things in our town going forward.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Yeah, I appreciate what Nick has said, but I think in the long run, I think that I would like to see us, the designation report revisited, just as has been suggested by at least me and not to mention some of the comments that you've made. I don't think that revisiting it and bringing it forward again is a bad thing. There's another council meeting coming up. It doesn't mean that it's, extending it is, we don't have to rush to judgment. It doesn't mean it's killing it. It just means that it's being revisited. I think that having a designation report that is logical is going to be more beneficial. It will actually make more sense to the citizens of the town of Silver City, and will certainly make more sense to me as a council member wanting to vote on this resolution, because I can see the positives. I can see how this is going to be beneficial. But I also don't want to do this without the report echoing what is needed, but not in a way that juxtaposes things that are unique about Silver City that has been pointed out will never be repaired, that are not going to be repaired, but that there are other ways that, for instance, those high sidewalks, the drainages that we already have that are naturally there in place, the fact that the water runs down them, the fact that they always run down them, that's what causes the problem, because that creates the problem with resurfacing. How can we correct the resurfacing in that area? Because it is a natural drainage. It will always be a natural drainage. So that's part of the redevelopment that we would be seeking, is how do we find a way to make sure that those streets can be resurfaced in such a way that will enhance the area, but yet retain something that's important to the historic nature of the town. That's a different way of rephrasing something in this report, and at least in the designation. So that's what I'm asking for, is logical designation report that can stream straight from the resolution into why we're designating this area that way. And I think that, to me, that's really what it comes down to, because when you point to all these things, and then also the photographs of the areas have to be ones that really are streets. They're through streets, that we're actually using the streets, not a parking lot. And I think that there's more than enough of them in the area that's being considered that can be used. So there's a few other areas like that, so I think that, I think just going through, correcting those sorts of things, bringing it back again, that will just ensure that this councilor is going to look at it and definitely vote it through. Right now, I can't support it with the way the designation report is written, especially with the suggestions I made earlier in the evening. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Nick, I think what you said, it was perfect. It was well said. And I don't think you've heard objection to that up here. Nobody's objecting to the concept, to the potential. We have problems with the report. And I'll be real short. Less subjective, more objective, and I'll be more happy.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the sentiment, and I'm sure, not to speak for Mr. Deans, but I'm sure that Charlie can do some wonderful things to make it meet your standards. I will say, I've heard a lot of, the end result of this is going to be, we're not going to be able to adopt this without biting the bullet and using blight and slum again. That just goes with the territory, whether we like it or not. And I certainly don't like it, probably any more than you do. But this is an amazing opportunity for us, and I hope that we can alter it in whatever way makes us feel as good about it as we possibly can. The reality is that in the end, we're still going to have to use those dirty words, and it's not going to be a lot of fun for me any more than for you. I'll also mention, incidentally, we've got the picture behind the public safety building. And it's true, we know how that has been used ever since the public safety building has been there. But to say that that is necessarily its highest and best use for all time, that there could not be ways that that space could contribute more to the community, again, in the long run, there are certainly other options that we could probably look at in terms of developing parking so that the public safety building could have a more secure space to make that happen. The fact remains that that spot is the confluence of Silver Creek and Pinos Altos Creek. That's the head of the big ditch. That's the only place where you can stand on Main Street, where it's still Main Street, and look down where Main Street used to be. That's a spot that is intensely powerful when you're telling the story of where that came from. And right now, we don't use it at all. One of the key ideas in our downtown action plan talks about finding some way to interpret the story of the big ditch at that point where you can see that transition from street into ditch, because otherwise it's kind of hard sometimes to imagine that, yeah, this is what that was. So there's good reason why that's in there, and even though it's not what you traditionally think of as blight or slum, it's a real opportunity for us to do something that could help us as a community.
And that's not how that was used in this designation report.
Right. But when we get to the next phase, we can turn around and say, aha, but there it is. And that's a lot of what this is the foundation and the groundwork of the next step in the process, which is coming up with the plan and figuring out where we go next.
Any other testimony in support of the application or the resolution? Is there any testimony in opposition to the resolution? I'll entertain a motion. Or not? Yeah?
How do I do that? How do I do the continuance? The next meeting? Our next meeting, I don't know if it will allow that time, but our next meeting's 11/27, the one after that, December 11th. Which should be better?
Charlie's chin didn't hit the floor.
Charlie, which meeting is better?
The next meeting is November 27th. I'm out of the country.
Okay.
I'm fleeing after I call you slight and blunt. You can't go anywhere, but you can blame me for all that.
December 11th?
December 11th, I think we're already scheduled for that, for the next step of this, but if we're going to revisit this, we're on the potential agenda for December 11th as it stands.
You're not on the agenda yet.
Not yet, but it's been, I'm available December 11th.
You're available, that gives us time to notice.
Okay, so I postpone it until there, or do I say it's continuation of the hearing until then? What is the proper wording?
Continue the hearing to a definite time and place.
Continue the hearing to a definite time and place.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I move that we approve to continue the hearing of resolution number 2012-27, Metropolitan Redevelopment Area Designation, making certain findings and determinations pursuant to the Metropolitan Redevelopment Code, and designating the Silver City Downtown Metropolitan Redevelopment Area to December 11th, 2012, in the Grant County Administration Building, during the regular town council meeting.
Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to continue this hearing December 11th in this building during a town council meeting. Correct?
Yeah, during a regular time.
During a regular town council meeting. Is there any discussion? There's a motion. Counselor.
Just a quick comment, I'm being a numbers guy, I went straight to the economic numbers, the stats, the housing stats and everything else, and I was pretty much sold. I didn't even look at the pictures until some of the questions were brought up. I think sometimes in a way the pictures are a red herring to the stats that actually substantiated everything. That was all we needed. So I would say I would look forward to something that just was numbers.
Any other discussion? There's a motion, a second, no further discussion to continue this hearing for December 11th in this building, in this room, during the regular town council meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Cook.
Mr. Mayor. May I take a break? Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adjourn this just for a few minutes while I go to the bathroom, please.
Make a motion for recess.
Okay, recess.
I second the motion as stated.
We have a motion and a second for a short recess. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries for recess. We'll call this meeting of the Town Council back to order. The next item on the agenda is approval, disapproval of resolution number 2012-28 for the regular municipal election to be held on March 5th, 2013. Would our town clerk like to introduce it?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm asking for your approval of resolution number 2012-28 for the regular municipal election on March 5th, 2012, for elected offices of District 1 Councilor for a 2-year term and District 3 Councilor for a 2-year term. The District 1 voting location will be at the Women's Club. The District 3 voting location will be at the Senior Center, same as always. Absentee voting will begin on January 29th. Early voting on the machine will begin February 13th. Persons desiring to vote in our election must register with the county clerk by February 5th. All declarations of candidacy must be filed in my office on January 8th between the hours of 8 and 5, and we will be casting votes on paper ballots to be counted on the M100 electronic vote tabulators, the same machines we've used for years. And I'm asking for your approval.
Any discussion? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor.
I move that we approve resolution number 2012-28 for the regular municipal election to be held on March 5th, 2013.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor. There's a motion and a second to approve. Is there any other discussion? There's a motion and a second to approve resolution 2012-28 for the regular municipal election to be held on March 5th, 2013. A roll call.
Aye.
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 Councilman Rhodes.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval, disapproval of the destruction of records from the Executive Finance Municipal Court, Police, Recreation Center, Public Library, Community Development, and Utilities Department. Quantity 213.5 boxes. And?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm asking for your approval to destroy 213.5 boxes of town records. We've already received approval from State Records and Archives, and upon your approval, I would contact we have a contract with a bonded shredding vendor that the state also uses, and I'll contact them to pick up our records and do the shredding for us. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
No, sir.
Entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approval of destruction of records from the executive, finance, municipal court, police, recreation center, public library, community development, and utilities department, quantity 213.5 boxes. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There's a motion and a second, no discussion, for the approval of the destruction of records from the executive, finance, municipal court, police, recreation center, public library, community development, and utilities department, quantity 213.5 boxes. Do I need a roll call in? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is appointment to the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement Citizens Advisory Committee. And Mr. Jeffrey Hill has applied. He's been vetted by the committee chair, and I find him to be qualified, and if there's no objection, I would appoint Jeffrey Hill to the committee.
No objection.
No objections. Hearing no objections, Mr. Hill is duly appointed. Dr. Hill. Sorry. The next item on the agenda is appointment to the Historic Design Review Committee. And we have an applicant, Suzanne Gershenson, and find her to be qualified and eligible to serve. And if there's no objection, I would like to appoint Suzanne Gershenson to the Historic Design Review Committee.
No objection. No objection.
Hearing no objections, Suzanne Gershenson is duly appointed. And Councilor Ray.
Mr. Mayor, may I have round 3?
If there's no objections from the council, Councilor Ray would like to add round 3 to reports or council comments.
No objection.
Councilor Ray, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am asking to see the public to support me. I'm going to run for re-election. I enjoy being on the council, although I don't say much. I like to observe before I say something. I enjoy Mr. Brown, Robert Scavern, and the mayor, everybody involved. I have a lot of fun with them, and I do believe that we have a very good council, and we're not all about ourselves, it's for everybody. So with that, I hope to retain my seat again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I move to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.